Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. At question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Despite sustained efforts by my party, Scotland's Parliament does not want to talk about a case that everyone across Scotland is talking about. So we're going to talk about that right now. A female nurse with 30 years of dedicated service to the NHS faces the sack for her concerns about a man using a women's changing room. The Employment Tribunal will rule in due course, but there is absolutely no reason why MSPs cannot discuss the wider issues. Women's spaces must be for women and girls. So does John Swinney agree that every woman in Scotland should be entitled to this and to say this without losing their job?
First Minister.
So before I answer Russell Finlay's question, I just want to take this opportunity to place on record the fact that on Monday I will attend a commemoration service in Edinburgh to mark the 3rd anniversary of the illegal invasion of Ukraine. And I am certain when I go to that, I will go there with the wholehearted support of every member of this Parliament who is repulsed by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and stands in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. I have, of course, been paying very close attention to the issues raised by Mr Finlay and by Conservative members in Parliament, and the Government has taken the view that we cannot comment on the ongoing proceedings that Mr Finlay raises. The reason for that is set out in Section 1 of the Judiciary and Courts Scotland Act 2008, which at Section 1, under the title of Guaranteed of Continued Judicial Independence, it says that the following persons must uphold the continued independence of the judiciary: A, the First Minister; B, the Lord Advocate; C, the Scottish Ministers; D, members of the Scottish Parliament. It goes on at subsection 2 to say in particular the First Minister, the Lord Advocate and the Scottish Ministers must not seek to influence judicial decisions through any special access to the judiciary. Now, if I was to comment on this case, I would be in danger of breaking the law. And I believe in the rule of law, and nobody will persuade me to break the rule of law in this Parliament. No questioning from Mr Finlay, no barracking, no heckling, nothing will stop me from protecting the right to ensure that the law is upheld in this country. The guidance that is in place in relation to the issues that Mr Finlay raises on a general level explains as follows. The Equality Act 2010 does allow the provision to exclude a trans person from single or separate-sex facilities. These kinds of decisions must be made on a case-by-case basis. Managers must balance the needs of the trans person to use this facility against the needs of other members of staff. They should also consider if other staff members will experience any disadvantage if the trans person is allowed to use the facilities. That is the position and guidance supported by law, and I hope that answers Mr Finlay's question.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. I also look forward to attending the memorial service on Monday, and I wholeheartedly agree with the First Minister's comments in that regard. We can indeed talk about the generalities of this case, despite the First Minister's selective legal interpretations. The SNP Health Secretary was warned directly last year about the NHS ignoring women's fundamental rights under the Equality Act, but he did nothing about it. And just weeks ago, Scotland's NHS published what it describes as a gender transitioning guide. This official document confirms that women's rights to single-sex spaces are not protected in the NHS. But the document has now disappeared from the NHS website. The page appears to have been deleted. So has this guidance been scrapped? And if it has not, will John Swinney do so?
First Minister.
I don't think it's good enough for Russell Finlay to say that I've selectively expressed the basis of the position that I take, that I cannot comment on live legal proceedings, because the law requires me not to do so. And if Russell Finlay cannot respect that, and accept that, then I think the Conservative Party is in a pretty dismal place if that is their position today. And I come back to the point that I made in my first answer, that the guidance, and I'm reading from the guidance that Mr Finlay is talking about, the Equality Act 2010 does allow the provision to exclude a trans person from single or separate sex facilities. These kinds of decisions must be made on a case-by-case basis. Managers must balance the needs of the trans person to use this facility against the needs of other members of staff. They should also consider if other staff members will experience any disadvantage if the trans person is allowed to use the facilities. Now, that's the second time I've put that on the record, openly and candidly to Parliament. Mr Finlay should now start to adjust his questions, because I've answered the point that he's put to me.
Russell Finlay.
I'm going to repeat this again, and I'll do it very slowly for the First Minister's benefit. At no point have I asked him to comment on this specific case, although I do note that his Health Secretary did exactly that yesterday. Now, this madness isn't just happening within the NHS. It's in schools, it's in prisons, it's in rape crisis centres. Female pupils too scared to use shared toilets over fear of sexual intimidation or assault. A male prisoner serving life for murder in a women's prison and able to get an operation to reduce his Adam's apple. Rape victims being told they are bigots for wanting to know the sex of their counsellor. Scotland's public services waste too much time, energy and money on this nonsense, all because of SNP gender self-ID policy and legislation with the backing of Labour, the Lib Dems and the Greens. And yesterday, astonishingly, John Swinney said that he has no regrets. Does he really have no regrets about causing all this harm to women and all this cost to taxpayers?
First Minister.
I think the point that Mr Finlay skates past is the significance of the Equality Act 2010, which was enshrined, because it has to be enshrined, because we can't change the law, because it's a reserved piece of legislation, is enshrined in the legislation that this Parliament passed on gender recognition. So I've quoted to Mr Finlay the fact that the Equality Act 2010 makes provision for there to be single or separate sex facilities and for those rights to be put into practice and into place. I don't know why Mr Finlay is so determined to just keep pursuing this line of argument, which is about sowing division in our society, when the legal position is absolutely crystal clear that the Equality Act protects the ability to have single-sex spaces in our country, and Mr Finlay should accept that.
Russell Finlay.
Well, John Swinney, there's two things happening here. Either he's in a state of complete denial or he's a very good actor. I'm not sure which. The SNP focus on the issue of gender has harmed Scotland's public services. They've put their ideology before the rights of women and girls, but also before NHS waiting lists, before justice for victims, before our children's education. Anna Sarwar and the Lib Dem leader are just as culpable as the SNP. Their collective support for this nonsense confirms how utterly disconnected Parliament has become from the real world. My party believes all government time and money should be devoted to fixing Scotland's public services, not on radical fringe policies, and that's where we proudly stand. So what about John Swinney? Will he do the right thing and bin his gender ideology that is causing so much harm to our country?
First Minister.
Again, Mr Finlay ignores the point I've put to him about the significance of the Equality Act and the obligation and the underpinning of all legislation and its requirements to be compatible with the Equality Act 2010. Now, Mr Finlay asked me about my priorities, and my priorities are absolutely crystal clear. I'm in office to improve the lives of the people of Scotland, by making sure that we eradicate child poverty, by making sure that we grow the economy, by making sure we make the transition to net zero and make sure that we strengthen the public services of Scotland. We've got a budget before this Parliament next Tuesday that will turn this into effect. The people who are standing in the way of that budget being approved to improve the lives of the people of Scotland, the people that are standing in the way of that budget being approved.
Let's hear the First Minister.
The people that are standing in the way of that budget being approved, the people that are not interested in improving the lives of the people of Scotland, are the Conservative Party and their parade in front of Nigel Farage, who support their courting in Scotland today. So I am going to take no lessons from Russell Finlay, who has no interest in the prospects and the future of the people of Scotland. He's only here to support division. I'm here to bring people together.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, 1 in 6 Scots are on an NHS waiting list. There is an NHS crisis with lives being lost. So when will John Swinney, Neil Gray and this SNP government stop focusing on disciplining a nurse and instead focus on supporting NHS staff, getting patients treated, clearing the backlogs, stopping the need for patients to spend thousands of pounds to go private, and ending the ATM rush for a GP appointment?
First Minister.
Well, Presiding Officer, if Mr Sarwar had been following the speech that I delivered a few weeks ago, which I think he did because he raised some of these issues with me before, he would know that I'm absolutely focused on tackling the issue of waiting times. I'm absolutely focused on improving access to the National Health Service. I'm absolutely focused on making sure that the needs of the people of Scotland are met by the National Health Service. That's why my budget on Tuesday will include a record settlement for the National Health Service. And Mr Sarwar, as things stand just now, but at the rate at which he's flip-flopping on his positions on a daily basis, is not proposing to support the budget on Tuesday.
Absolutely. Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney has had 18 years to get to grips with the issues in Scotland, and the fact is SNP incompetence has consequences. They promised 800 more GPs, but whole-time equivalent GPs has actually fallen by over 200. Everyone across the country will know the ATM rush for a GP appointment. Many left hanging for hours but getting nowhere. And some will be sick of the daily texts that read, "Please don't call, there are no appointments left, call tomorrow or go to A&E." And it all comes back to the SNP's failure to get to grips with waiting times. As one GP put it to me, a patient waiting 2 years for a hip replacement, rather than the legal 12 weeks, means they are repeatedly presenting at a GP practice for pain relief, just adding further pressure and demand on our NHS. So why can't John Swinney see that his SNP government has plunged our NHS into this vicious cycle?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the number of GPs per head of population in Scotland stands at 82. In England it's 64, in Wales it's 67, and in Northern Ireland it's 75. And there are more GPs available in Scotland as a consequence of the investment the government has made, with 307 GPs recruited or added since 2007. And we have commitments to increase the number of GPs, and we are working to deliver against that. Now, of course, the whole issue of the performance of the National Health Service comes down to the way in which we can tackle waiting times. And on the most recent data that's available, between October 2023 and September 2024, there was a 9.5% increase in procedures undertaken within the National Health Service. Now, that's really welcome. And over the weekend, Mr Sarwar was making a big thing about the increase in activity in England and Wales. And the increase in England and Wales since the Labour government came in has been 7.6%. But we've seen an increase, and that's against a backdrop of the fact that there was strike action in England. So no wonder the number of procedures have increased in England, because there was strike action under the Tories. In Scotland, we've got a 9.5 increase in procedures, and we should welcome that today. And I'm surprised Mr Sarwar hasn't done so.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, more than 800,000 Scots on an NHS waiting list, and that's the best answer John Swinney can give. And the reality is, he can't even accept the problem, let alone fix it. And let me give him an example, and perhaps the Health Secretary should listen. I know he's been sidelined, but perhaps he should listen to this. An expectant mother in South Edinburgh, who should have had a GP-organised midwife appointment within 8 weeks, was instead left waiting months for an appointment. She said, "I had to call the GP surgery over 50 times to try and get through at 8 AM. It's not sustainable." This is the harsh reality of healthcare under the SNP. Pregnant women left anxiously waiting, people in pain forced to go to A&E, and people unable to work because they can't get the treatment they need. And that's why this week I've set out my plan to end the ATM rush for a GP appointment, ensuring every Scot who needs to be seen is seen in a GP surgery within 48 hours. And isn't the truth that John Swinney can't see the problem because he created the problem, and he can't fix our NHS because his SNP government broke it?
First Minister.
Well, on Tuesday, in the budget that Anna Sarwar currently is not going to support, there will be an increase in the resources available for general practice to the tune of £13.6 million. So on Tuesday, Anna Sarwar and his colleagues can do the right thing, and they can vote for the budget to start making the progress that apparently he is interested in making. Now, Mr Sarwar set out his commitments about GP appointments. He set out the plans and the promises that he's going to make. But let's look at the record of the Labour Party on the delivery of their promises. Mr Sarwar stood beside me in a Scottish television debate and promised he would save Grangemouth. And the Labour government hasn't lifted a finger to save Grangemouth. They promised justice for the WASPy women, and they turned their backs on the WASPy women. They promised GB Energy would bring down energy bills, and energy bills have gone up. They promised jobs and stability, and employers' national insurance contributions have gone up. Now, one thing we can conclude is that Labour say one thing before the election, and then they don't deliver on it after the election, and people should remember that in Scotland.
Question number 3, Lorna Slater.
This week, US Vice President J.D. Vance has spread misinformation about laws made in this Scottish Parliament. His claims about my colleague Gillian Mackay's Safe Access Zones Act are grossly misleading. Emboldened by Mr Vance's comments, anti-choice groups have already started to target patients outside the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow, with more actions planned in coming weeks. Last summer, members of this Parliament agreed overwhelmingly that everyone should be able to access abortion services free from harassment. What is the First Minister doing to correct false claims and provide clarity to the public on what buffer zones mean for them? And how will he protect safe access to healthcare in Scotland?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the seriousness of the points that Lorna Slater puts to me, and let me just say that on the issues in relation to protests yesterday, these are obviously live issues in the criminal justice system, so I will not comment on those particular issues for the same reasons that I said to Russell Finlay earlier on. Now, obviously, the remarks made by the Vice President of the United States last week about the Safe Access Zones legislation in Scotland were untrue. They were incorrect. And I'm grateful to Lorna Slater for providing the opportunity for me to say that to Parliament openly and to clarify that position. There is the idea that private prayer in an individual's home is in any way contradicted or constrained by this legislation is just not correct. In relation to Lorna Slater's point to me about what is the government doing on these issues, ahead of the Act coming into force, we published clear guidance on both NHS Inform and the Scottish Government website, and we issued letters to householders who were affected by the zones about what the Act meant for their localities. And I would urge anyone with questions to read the online guidance that's available.
Yeah. Thank you. Question, Lorna Slater.
The White House manufactures mistruths, tech billionaires profit from them, and bad faith actors spread them. Disinformation is playing an increasingly dangerous role in our communities and in our global politics. Promoting lies and misinformation at home and abroad can have serious consequences for all our communities. Friendly countries do not tell lies about each other. Does the First Minister agree that political leaders everywhere must stand up to disinformation? And will he ask Keir Starmer to demand an urgent apology from the White House when the Prime Minister meets Trump next week?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, obviously I think the Prime Minister is well able to engage in dialogue with the President of the United States, and I will obviously I very much welcome the engagement of the Prime Minister in the European dialogue that took place earlier on this week on the situation in Ukraine, which I think was a very welcome step. Yeah. And I welcome what the Prime Minister said last night on the Ukrainian situation into the bargain. In the general point that Lorna Slater makes to me, I think that we are living in an era where disinformation is regularly circulated in our political discourse. Yeah. I think it is harming our political discourse. I think we have plenty of evidence of it in this Parliament, and I certainly want to be one of those individuals who stands up for the clarity of information, who speaks truth to Parliament and expresses in detail. Yes, Jackie Bailey, seriously, speaking truth to Parliament, that's what I'm about. The Labour Party might want to deceive.
Members, let's hear the First Minister.
Well, for some reason, on an issue where we are tackling disinformation in our society, Jackie Bailey believes that she should question the integrity of the First Minister speaking truth to Parliament, which I do at all times. And Jackie Bailey and no other member can come to this Parliament and say otherwise, and it's a disgrace that such behaviour takes place in this Parliament.
Thank you. Before we move to question 4, I would remind all members that they should not be shouting from their seats. And I call Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the recent Labour Market Outlook survey by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development on UK business confidence.
First Minister.
President, so this survey of employers across the UK shows just how damaging the Labour Government's decision to raise employer national insurance contributions is going to be, with nearly a third saying they might have to cut jobs and over 40% needing to raise prices to cope with the additional costs. That, of course, affects consumers who are still struggling with the cost of living pressures. It demonstrates further how short-sighted and harmful this Labour tax hike is. It is effectively a tax on jobs.
Claire Adamson.
Does the First Minister share my concern that while the tax on jobs is causing business confidence to plummet, it is having an absolutely devastating effect on our third sector and charity organisations, people who do vital work in our constituencies to help people who are vulnerable, in poverty, in recovery, and who are absolutely essential to the well-being of Scotland?
First Minister.
I understand entirely the point that Claire Adamson puts to me, and I sympathise with it. We are very concerned within Government about the impact on all sectors of the economy, but especially on the charitable sector and the third sector, and particularly where we are very concerned about the impact the national insurance contribution increases will have on the social care sector, which is very much in the organisations that Claire Adamson raises with me today. So we have put these concerns to the United Kingdom Government, as the Finance Secretary said just in general questions before we started First Minister's questions, and we will continue to do so.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Audit Scotland has confirmed that between 2017 and 2022, hard-pressed Scottish taxpayers paid £3.4 billion more in tax as a result of his government's high-tax agenda. But slower economic growth in Scotland means the net benefit to the Scottish budget over the same period is just £629 million, £2.6 billion effectively disappearing down John Swinney's drain. So when will the First Minister wake up to the simple fact that everyone else can see, that the SNP and now Labour's low-growth, high-tax policies have badly backfired?
First Minister.
Well, what I'd say to Craig Hoy is that more people are coming to live in Scotland than are leaving Scotland. Yeah, that's official data. We are seeing, if we followed the Conservative approach to public expenditure, we would have to cut public expenditure by £1 billion, and the Conservatives have not come up with a scrap of evidence as to how that would be done. They have, as I've pointed out before, a £950 billion gaping hole in their tax proposals. And of course, on Tuesday, Parliament will have the opportunity to support a budget that invests in housing, in the economy, in growth within our public services, in the National Health Service, in education, in culture. And as things stand just now, the Conservatives are going to vote against all of that benefit for the people of Scotland.
Yeah. Thank you. Question number 5, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on the Scottish Government's plans to update the School Premises General Requirements and Standards Scotland Regulations 1967.
First Minister.
The Government is committed to ensuring our school environments support every child and young person to reach their full potential for learning. The School Premises Regulations prescribe the broad minimum standards that school buildings must meet and were last updated in 1979. It is therefore this Government's intention to refresh and modernise the regulations to ensure that they meet the needs of pupils and schools in Scotland, and a consultation will take place this year.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the First Minister for his response. Presiding Officer, too many times in this chamber we've heard the SNP dismiss concerns about the safety of women and girls. Instead of safeguarding single-sex spaces, such as school toilets, the SNP has spent years trying to undermine them, all in the name of dangerous gender ideology. The case of Sandy Peggy has revealed that the SNP's dismissive attitude towards women's safety has well and truly infected Scotland's public bodies. The lack of single-sex facilities puts the rights and safety of women and girls at risk, whether that is girls filmed in school toilets or women being forced to share changing rooms with biological males. So does the First Minister regret supporting Nicola Sturgeon's reckless self-ID law? And does he agree with me that single-sex facilities in schools should be a basic right for female pupils and staff?
First Minister.
Well, the regulations that Pam Gossel is talking about were last updated in 1979, and my recollection is that in 1979 there was a Conservative government. Now, so all of the issues that are being taken forward in relation to this regulated environment are in age-old regulation that I think we need to review, and that's what the question was about. Second point I would make is that local authorities are responsible for the design of their schools, and they take those forward in consultation and dialogue with the school community, and I'd expect them to do exactly that. And the final point I would make is that this Government, as a consequence of our investment programme, has increased the proportion of schools in good or satisfactory condition from the 62.7% that we inherited in 2007 from the Labour and Liberal Executive to 91.7% in 2024, which is a tribute to the public sector investment this Government has presided over.
Thank you. Question number 6, Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government has taken to reduce the disability employment gap.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is committed to halving the disability employment gap. In 2023, the employment rate for disabled people was 52.7%, exceeding our first interim target by 2.7%. Through the implementation of our Fair Work Action Plan, we've reduced barriers and improved recruitment and retention of disabled people, but we will of course take further actions, but have to be cognizant of the fact that we have only limited powers in this area, as employment powers are reserved to the United Kingdom Government.
Colin Smith.
The disability employment gap shamefully remains above 40% in Dumfries and Galloway. Yet the future of the Usual Place Community Cafe in Dumfries, which provides life-changing opportunities for young people with disabilities and additional support needs, helping many into employment, is in doubt because of difficulty securing adequate funding. Now, I know the First Minister is familiar with this project, so will he give a commitment that the Government and its agencies will urgently consider what support it can give to avoid the current proposed redundancies at the Usual Place, and will he arrange for the Cabinet Secretary to meet with myself and a cross-party group of MSPs from South Scotland to discuss how together we can help secure the long-term future of this transformative project and the futures of so many young people who depend upon it?
First Minister.
As Mr Smith knows, I am very familiar with the Usual Place. It's an organisation I respect enormously. I respect the impact that it has on the lives of young people. So I've been concerned to read of the information, and I'm familiar with the challenges that they face. I think for completeness, I should say, and I don't make this point pejoratively, but it is the hard reality of what we're dealing with. The increase in national insurance contributions has been cited by the company as a contributory factor towards their difficulties. But I am committed to making sure that we do all that we can to support the Usual Place, subject of course to all of the normal processes that we have to go through, and I give them the commitment that I will encourage and motivate our agencies to make sure that they do exactly that.
Oliver Mundell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I recognise the First Minister's personal commitment to this project, and I wonder if he would go one better and come to Dumfries and meet with the young people and their families at the heart of this project and see first-hand how life-changing it is, and maybe he'll bring his famed deal-making skills and try and pull together a positive future plan for the organisation.
First Minister. I should have said in relation to Colin Smith, I was very happy for ministers to engage on that, but if Oliver Mundell is inviting me to go to Dumfries to have that discussion, I will certainly do all that I can to do that. He'll appreciate there are many pressures in my diary, but I will try to do that as early as I possibly can do. And my famous deal-making skills will be available that day. And of course, they could have an early outing on Tuesday by having Mr Mundell. And I would just encourage Mr Mundell, if he's in a somewhat potentially reckless position now, since he's standing down at the next election, I would encourage him to break the whip and vote for the government's budget on Tuesday.
We move to general and constituency supplementaries, and I call Kevin Stewart.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government has supported Ukrainian refugees since the beginning of Putin's illegal aggression on Ukraine. Can the First Minister confirm that Scotland's support for Ukrainian people living here will continue? And will he make clear today that the Scottish Government continues to condemn Russian aggression and that we stand by the people of Ukraine's rights to freedom, democracy and self-determination?
First Minister.
I associate myself entirely with Kevin Stewart's position and comments in relation to the illegal invasion of Ukraine. Russian aggression needs to be repelled, and the territorial integrity and the independence of Ukraine must be asserted. We as a country have, and this has had cross-party support, have done a lot to welcome Ukrainian refugees to Scotland. I express our solidarity with them today and indicate that the Government will do all that it can to ensure their safety and security here in Scotland.
Thank you. Edward Mountain.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Cairngorm Funicular Railway opened, actually, in January 23, after 4 years of repairs. 4 years that cost £25 million. It closed months later because the repairs were defective, and it's remained closed ever since. Now, we were told in November that it would reopen for the 24 season. That became the 4th of December, the 20th of December, early January, early February in time for the school holidays, none of which happened. In fact, it's remained closed. And this incompetence of HIE has cost the taxpayers and local businesses millions of pounds. After nearly 6 years of incompetence, surely the First Minister will support my calls for an inquiry into this fiasco and now remove HIE from the management of our Cairngorm Mountain.
First Minister.
This is a very difficult project in very challenging conditions. I think the fact that it's a funicular railway in the Cairngorm Mountains is an indication of its challenge and difficulty. I've got the utmost confidence in Highlands Anne's enterprise. I think they're an excellent organisation. They command my total confidence. I think they're well led. I think they're committed to doing good things for the Highlands and Islands, and I have absolutely no intention of pursuing the approach suggested by Mr Mountain. I can assure him that HIE are fully focused on securing the reopening of the funicular railway, and it would be a great boost to the community in and around the Aviemore area, and I know that it's got the attention and priority of Highlands Anne's enterprise.
Rhoda Grant.
Presiding Officer, the First Minister will be aware that dangerous levels of radon gas have been recorded in parts of the Inverness Justice Centre. This radioactive gas is known to cause cancer. I understand that 2 areas of the building are subject to time-based access restrictions. However, other parts of the building staff are working and they remain there working full-time. Can I ask the First Minister what he's doing to resolve this difficult situation and keep staff and visitors to the Justice Centre safe?
First Minister.
Well, the absolute requirement must be that all health and safety legislation in relation to access to the building while this issue exists must be followed. So that's the first assurance that I give to Rhoda Grant, that those requirements must be absolutely followed. The second point is that obviously there are issues that are having to be addressed about the environment in the building. Those will be taken forward by the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service, and I'm very happy to provide Rhoda Grant with an update on the developments that are taking place to ensure that the fundamental issues are remedied.
Keith Brown.
The First Minister will be aware that the UK Treasury has forecast that energy bills could soar by over £100 in April. The third rise, in fact, since Labour came to power, and that's despite Labour's election promise that they would cut household energy bills by £300. Does the First Minister share my concern about what appears to be yet another broken election promise from Anas Sarwar's Westminster bosses? And will he join me in calling on the UK Government to take urgent action to support families across Scotland with energy costs ahead of the next energy cap announcement expected next week?
First Minister.
I agree with Mr Brown. The Labour Party promised a reduction of £300 in energy bills right away, and we know from what's happened since the election, and we know from the comments made by the Chair of GB Energy, that GB Energy will not be delivering reductions in energy bills anytime soon. So I think Mr Brown raises an important point that Scotland should be aware of, that the Labour Party says one thing before an election to get elected and then does another after the election, and people should be wary of the promises from the Labour Party.
Absolutely. Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Nearly every public health indicator for Scotland is concerning. It's getting worse, with pressure on our health service increasing week to week, it seems. We now have a report indicating a shock rise in overweight Scottish youngsters as young as 2 being referred to for specialist obesity treatment. Scotland is the most obese country in Europe, costing the Scots economy £5.3 billion, according to a Nesta report. Yet the Scottish Government consistently cut the budget of those organisations who are best placed to reverse this trend. We learn once again that Sport Scotland will have their budgets cut and are looking to cut staff, and there's the continual erosion of council facilities. First Minister, there is much talk of a preventative agenda, but evidence says that little more than empty rhetoric. Does the Scottish Government not realise that by continually eroding opportunity to adopt a healthier lifestyle, all the Scottish Government is doing is heaping ever more pressure on our health service and the health service budget?
First Minister.
My government follows an approach which is designed to support early intervention to address the important issues that Brian Whittle puts to me. But let me just point out to Parliament that Brian Whittle is arguing for more money to be spent on sport and more money to be spent on local government. Now, well, Mr Whittle has just asked me a question which has asked for more money for sport and more money for local government. Now, the government has a budget before Parliament on Tuesday. Mr Whittle proposes to vote against that, and his party wants us to cut public spending by £1 billion. Now, this is just completely and utterly incoherent. Yes. So, if Mr Whittle wants to make sure a budget, the government's bringing forward a budget which increases local authority expenditure, why can't Mr Whittle, if he wants to carry these things through, vote for the government's budget and try and make things happen in Scotland?
Absolutely. Ben Macpherson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today is World Cholangiocarcinoma Day. For those unaware, it is a rare and aggressive type of cancer that develops in the bile duct. Can I ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government and NHS Scotland are supporting those diagnosed with the condition and raising awareness of it? And whether the Scottish Government will give consideration to providing full NHS funding for the geomatic testing necessary for patients to access all Scottish Medical Consortium approved therapies?
First Minister.
I recognise the importance of the point that Ben Macpherson raises with me, and the Government's approach is directed through the Detect Cancer Earlier programme, in which we are committed to raising awareness of possible cancer symptoms, and our new primary care cancer education platform, Gateway C, provides education and tools to support earlier diagnosis efforts and decision-making at the point of referral. We recognise that significant work is needed to develop the genomic testing that's available, including for bile duct cancer, and we have been working closely with partners to identify how this expanded testing can be commissioned and implemented in the National Health Service.
Finlay Carson.
Early last week, my constituents in Galloway were outraged and astonished at the utterly shameful decision by Scottish ministers to grant consent for a massive pylon route in the heart of some of the most beautiful landscapes in Scotland and indeed the world. Yet again an example of rural Scotland carrying a disproportionate weight of delivering net zero. Can the First Minister justify the decision to approve Spain's plan for this major power line through an area of outstanding beauty, despite the public inquiry, reporters' recommendation and overwhelming local opposition? And explain how this aligns with the Scottish Government's commitment to promoting Galloway's environmental assets and its possible designation as a national park?
First Minister.
I understand the points that Mr Carson puts to me. But what the Government has got to be mindful of is the need to take decisions that will ensure we have sufficiently strong and robust power networks to meet the needs of the population in every part of Scotland. And that's the process of discussion and dialogue that the Government is engaged with. We obviously engage substantively with communities, with local authorities on these questions, but there will be difficult decisions have to be arrived at in ensuring that we have adequate energy security and the appropriate infrastructure within our country.
Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Cole Thompson is 12 years old and lives with a severe form of drug-resistant epilepsy. Medical cannabis is keeping him alive, but his mum, Lisa Quarrell, is running out of funds to pay for Bedrolites privately. The NHS has made a small number of exceptions in England and England and Northern Ireland for children in a similar situation, but no such help in Scotland as yet, despite the best efforts of the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer, who has been very helpful. Time is running out, so will the First Minister ask the Health Secretary to urgently meet with me and Cole's mum to explore all possible options to get Cole the support that he needs?
First Minister.
I'm certainly happy for that discussion to take place. I know the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer will have been of assistance in these matters and will have done what can be done, but the Health Secretary will meet with Monica Lennon and with Cole's mum, and we'll see what we can do to address the situation.
Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the First Minister share my disbelief and outrage regarding the UK Government consulting on giving English whisky a geographical indication, the same definition as Scottish single malt? If approved, this move, entirely enabled by Brexit, would trample on the reputation and tradition of our whisky industry and Scottish brand. Does he also agree with the Scottish Whisky Association that the integrity of our single malt would be damaged by inferior whisky product, potentially harming industry, jobs and trade, including in the new distilleries in the south of Scotland and indeed across wider Scotland?
First Minister.
I share the concerns that have been expressed by Emma Harper, and they've also been expressed by the Scottish Whisky Association, who I know understand and promote and engage substantively across Parliament about the importance of the designation of Scotch whisky, which enables it to have such a powerful position within the international marketplace. So I can assure Emma Harper that the Government will make all necessary representations on this issue to protect the identity and the character of Scotch whisky.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Kenneth Gibson, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the gallery to do so.